Hi, welcome to today's Talking Wellbeing IG Live discussion. Hope you're all well today. I'm just waiting for today's guest speaker to join us, just inviting her in. Hi, James. Hope you can all see us and hear us well. Hi, Samiyrah, I can see you've joined. Just waiting for your image to come up in front of us. Just bear with us momentarily. I think Samiyrah is having connection issues. Just invited her back in. Hello.
Hello.
Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Hey, I don't know what's going on with that. Okay. I am doing well. I have a little bit of a lingering cough, so I am going to be sucking on a little bit of lozenges just to let you know. I hope it's not too much of a distraction.
No, of course, do you think? Obviously, now you've come in, I'll introduce you and hopefully everyone that's joining as well. Welcome to this discussion. And I'm joined today by Samiyrah Bennett. She is an author, a licensed psychotherapist, a clinical social worker, and a coach as well. And to begin with, actually, it'd be great to look at the 9 dimensions of wellness that you mention within your book, because chapter 3 is actually called Safeguard Your Wellbeing. So it would be a good starting point for people to know what that looks like.
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you for having me. I'm so incredibly honored to share space with you on this platform. So thank you, Amrit. And like you said, in my new published book, Intentionally Minding the Business of Me, I discuss a lot of different wellness. It's discussed about 10 strategies to really help build the mindset to connect with your most favorite version of self. And like you said in chapter 3, it's all about safeguarding your well-being and really prioritizing wellness and what that means. So I do discuss the 9 dimensions of wellness. Some people say that there's 5 dimensions of wellness. There's been people that say there's up to 15 dimensions of wellness. So I talk about the 9 dimensions, which include emotional and mental, physical, financial, intellectual, social, environmental, occupational, as well as spiritual and sexual wellness, right? And being able to understand that as human beings, we all have multifaceted systems, right? So we need to make sure that we are taking inventory, taking assessment, and understanding what needs attention. Where do my needs need to be met, and what does that look like? And how can I connect to resources to make sure those needs are met in each dimension? What some people don't realize is when you are depleting yourself in one dimension, it actually couples over to the next, which actually starts a domino effect where you are feeling just exhausted. You might see an increase of stress. You may see an increase of anxiety or depression, right? So if I'm not feeling well emotionally and mentally, it most likely is going to manifest physically, right? I may have some stomach aches, or find that I'm getting more frequent migraines, right? Or feeling sluggish because I'm dehydrated and I'm emotionally imbalanced. So being able to take inventory of what needs attention and being able to give yourself that is so important.
Mm-hmm. And how can somebody start to do that? Because obviously, when you hear all of that, it seems so wide and varied,
Yeah.
and I don't know where to start with it all.
Right. So it's really all about preventative measures versus, doing interventions. So understanding, okay, I always ask myself, what do I need? Can I take more good care of myself? And that's what I also encourage my clients to do, right? What exactly is coming up for you? how are you taking care of yourself? And if there is a bucket where you feel like that needs more attention, well, let's start there. Right. And so, like you said, it can be overwhelming to understand that there's all of these dimensions of wellness. The idea is that you're taking inventory and understanding exactly what space you need, or what space needs more attention, and where your needs are requiring meeting. Right. And so, emotional and mental wellness, that may look like checking in with how you're feeling on a daily basis. How do I feel today? What's coming up for me, being intentional about being real with your feelings, because a lot of people are kind of programmed in the subconscious of just going on about the day and really not being intentional about stopping and taking inventory about how they're feeling, what's coming up for them. And when you do that, that can lead to emotional suppression, right? And so when we suppress our emotions, right, they build upon each other, until sometimes you may explode and react in a situation that is not correlated to what exactly is happening, right? And that's because needs of emotional space was not provided for you at that previous time where you could have done that. So I would always encourage to daily take inventory. How am I feeling today? What do I need? What would that look like in order for me to meet that need? I think that's very important when it comes to emotional and mental wellness. So we're not minimizing our experience.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
it was coming to me actually when you were saying that. I kind of call it the pressure cooker effect. We just put everything into a pot, put a lid on it, but it has to be released in a safe way. Otherwise, that's where we can hurt ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when it comes to emotional and mental wellness, when you talk about releasing in a safe way, some things may look like, connecting with a therapist where you can have a safe space, being able to connect with a friend, also utilizing some exercises like journaling or brain dumping. A lot of some of my clients are finding useful is actually taping themselves, right? So sometimes when you don't want to share so much with friends or family, maybe you don't have the resources to connect with a therapist, still being intentional about the space that you're providing for yourself and just kind of talk it out. Like, what actually am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What do I need? How am I going to be intentional about connecting myself to meet those needs? And being able to hear it back sometimes can make all the difference in how you move forward, instead of having that internal audio tape kind of recycle and that recording, which actually can sometimes be a bully, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can have that sort of critical self-thinking or self-talk. So actually, when you're saying these things are, you're kind of almost stopping to reflect and also consider, like you said, what you're truly feeling inside, because we can almost go in autopilot.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time. I observe it all the time. So it's really just being intentional, doing it on purpose, of creating that space for yourself and saying, okay, what am I feeling? And honoring that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Some people try to avoid it and there leads to a suppression because you don't want to feel the quote unquote bad feelings. Feelings are feelings. They don't have to be good or bad. It's just what's happening right now. And as feelings come, I also know that they can go. So as they come, I hold space for it. I honor what I'm truly experiencing and I allow myself to move on to the next segment of my life, whatever that may be.
And I know in terms of, obviously, we mentioned your book, it says intentionally minding the business of me. What does that also look like? If intentional, what are the practices or strategies to do that?
Right. So intentionally minding the business of me is really like showing up for yourself on purpose. Right? It's really saying, I deserve to live a good life and define what that looks like for me. What does that mean for me? And being able to take inventory of what that looks like. So, like when we talk about the 9 dimensions of wellness, really exploring what that means for yourself. So, I actually have different chapters. Each chapter, because I told you, it talks about 10 strategies to build a mindset that leads to your most favorite version. So, each chapter talks about different ways that you can do that, right? So we talk about affirmations in the first chapter. We also talk about actually the business framework, which I actually provide to readers and my clients as well. And that's really being aware of your needs, understanding curiosity and reflection and how that shows up in your life, seeking solutions to your challenges, right? We don't have to just live with the challenges. We know one thing about challenges is that they have solutions, and being able to navigate what that means, what that looks like for yourself. Ignoring what doesn't align, noticing how you respond versus react. So when you talk about that impulsively reacting, when we have that emotional suppression and building upon, well, let's take inventory. Am I, impulsively reacting? Or what are some ways that I can explore to consciously respond? Right? So that's noticing how you respond versus react, extinguishing toxic patterns, because that's what it's all about. Really developing new forms of showing up for yourself, new forms of healthy coping. Also setting boundaries, and not only setting boundaries, but being consistent with them, right? So I find that a lot of people are able to set a boundary. I know I don't want to do this, and I know I want to protect this, but how do I continue this? How do I become consistent with this? And that's what I talk about in the book as well as showing up as your authentic self. Because so many people have been taught to shrink themselves, to be quiet in certain moments, to not be able to show up as themselves because it might be too much or not appropriately acceptable, whatever it may be. But understanding who you are to the core and being able to honor that and being able to explore and show up with that unapologetically.
And that is something obviously all of us hope to strive towards. Actually, what was coming out to me that I would love you to speak about some more is actually toxic patterns. What
Mhm.
does, like, how would you define them and how we sometimes get stuck in them?
Right. So I would say toxic patterns are really those things that don't make you feel good, where you feel like you are losing more and more of yourself, or you don't get to show up the way that you are. When you are recognizing that you are in a toxic pattern, asking yourself, is this something that you want to change? Right? Because without having one, an awareness, and two, making the decision that you want to change it, then you will consistently repeat that cycle. Right? So once you have an awareness that this is something that I don't like, this is something that I do want to see differently. Okay, decide I'm going to choose that I do want to do something differently. Okay, what exactly do I want to do differently? And once we can set that goal of what you want to do differently, then we can set up objectives in order for you to meet that goal of showing up differently and breaking that said pattern of what may be coming up. Right. And so the idea is that as humans, we are programmed in a way to crave familiarity. I really can't say that word. Crave what's familiar. So as human beings, we want to crave what's familiar all the time, even if it's not what's good for us, right? Our mind and our bodies are connected in a way to always want to be linked to, oh, that feels like that's what we usually do. Right. And anything that we don't usually do, our minds and bodies sends like red alerts, like, uh-oh, what are you doing? What are you doing, Amrit? We don't usually do this, right? So what we call that is that repetition compulsion, right? And so you're in a repetitive cycle. But what happens is it's because your mind and your body are trying to protect yourself, right? It's saying, no, we don't usually do this. So we want to stay here. We want to stay comfortable. So honoring that, I'm aware that my mind and my body want to stay comfortable. However, this comfortability is working against me showing up as my authentic self, and it's keeping me stuck in this pattern that I no longer like. So I can honor that. I can be aware that this is what's happening, and right with that concept of duality, and I can recognize I no longer want to do this. I'm going to start doing this instead. And the more that I practice to start doing this instead, then that becomes the new cycle. But it's also a healthier cycle. It's a healthier pattern, a healthier way of coping. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
completely.
yeah. So that's what breaking that toxic pattern and really showing up as your authentic self would look like. Of course, easier said than done, and that's why I always encourage someone to be able to contact a professional to help them navigate through that experience and that journey. But it definitely is something that is feasible if you're truly willing to, one, do the work. Right, you're going to be committed to doing the work and really showing up for yourself. If you made that decision that you want to show up for yourself, there's definitely ways that we can make sure that that happens for you.
Yes, for sure. And in terms of obviously looking at safeguarding your well-being, another thing that gets mentioned quite a lot and which you touched on as well is boundaries. I think sometimes people misunderstand boundaries as well. Like, as in, people might think that they're a way to keep people out, or sometimes people can become quite rigid in their boundaries, or on the flip side, they don't know how to even start. So I see clients myself fall into either one. How has that informed your work? What do you think about boundaries and how they can be applied?
Yeah, so I do think boundaries are a way of definitely protecting your wellness and safeguarding your well-being. It's really taking inventory of, again, what's working for me and what's not working for me. You really have to be able to define that, what is working for me and what is not working for me. And once you realize that something or someone is not working for you and you make that decision, boundaries is about you feeling good about the decisions that you are making and the things that you are engaging in, right? So I help my clients to be able to define, okay, what's working well and what's not working well. And once we define what's not working well, what exactly needs to be put in place in order for it to work well? What would that look like? Right? And once we can define what the ideal is, what the goal is that we're working towards, then we can take those steps in order to kind of break those patterns that have enabled people to kind of not be consistent with boundaries, and being able to really explore, okay, what do I need to do to show up on purpose, be intentional about what I'm willing to tolerate and what is not going to work for me any longer. Like we one have to be able to define what that looks like. And once we define this is not working for me, now we put in practices for, okay, what are we going to do to make sure that other people know that this is not working for me? Right? Does that mean that I'm having a conversation? Does that mean that I'm no longer answering certain phone calls? Does that mean that I'm no longer over explaining myself? So it can look like various ways.
Hmm. And that helps because, again, like I said, it can feel like these topics can seem vague. So that's why we also wanted to have this conversation like, okay, how does it practically look like in everyday life? Because we can say, okay, you need to safeguard your well-being. But strategy wise, application wise, it's always good to know, okay, this is what it looks like to me in my life.
Right, right, exactly. It's definitely individualized of how you want to safeguard your well-being or to put into boundaries. So let's say if you are wanting to not engage in certain conversations any longer because they definitely are increasing your stress, right? They're increasing your stress levels. Maybe you can tell this person, I no longer want to have these conversations. I'm noticing when I have these conversations that it's increasing my anxiety, it's building upon stress, being true to that. And so moving forward, I won't be having these kind of conversations. Right. So that's a way for you to kind of protect your well being and to be honest with what's coming up for you and what you don't want to participate in any longer.
Definitely saying, okay, this is what I will be a part of and this is what I won't be a part of is so important to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And defining that in every day, or even setting boundaries with yourself, right? So in particular, there's a lot of things happening in this world, right? A lot of external chaos. And sometimes we are overexposed and overstimulated because of what we're holding ourselves privy to, whether that's engaging in conversations or watching the news, right? Sometimes it can be too much. So having those boundaries for yourself, like, okay, well, I'm only going to check the headlines, or I'm not going to watch the news today, and that's okay. Or I'm refusing to have these kind of conversations because they make me feel overwhelmed or overstimulated. So being able to excuse me, being able to show up for yourself on purpose and being able to decipher, okay, what do I want to entertain or what am I no longer willing to entertain at that moment? Yeah. So saying no, or that's not going to work for me. Today, I talked about this, I think a couple of months ago. I talked about this. I had gone to the spa, and I have like an esthetician who always wants to talk. She wants to talk. She wants to talk. She wants to talk. And I had a long day. I had a long day that day, and in my mind, I said, I don't want to talk today. I just wanted to enjoy my visit. And so before we even got started, I went in and I said, I've had a long week, and I'm not going to be able to talk during our session today. And although it made me feel really uncomfortable because, well, what do I do? Sometimes I feel like I have therapists tattooed on my forehead, right? Everybody wants to talk to me. I'm always talking, I'm always talking. So I honored that feeling. Like, I feel really bad about that. And I realized that I have to do something to protect myself. I want to be able to relax in this moment, and I deserve that, right? So being able to talk yourself through it, even when you have uncomfortable feelings, is really important. And she respected it. There was a pause of kind of discomfort, like, oh, and she said, wow, that's really good that you're taking care of yourself that way. And we kind of moved on from there. So it was clear that we both had some discomfort, but we were able to move. I was able to express myself, right? And I was able to advocate for myself, which is so awesome, and still follow through on the boundary. So just really taking inventory in everyday life about how do you feel? Giving yourself permission to honoring your needs to make sure that you hold space for that feeling is so incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think that's where sometimes we can all, I don't want to say go wrong, but we can all overlook a feeling that we're having. We might minimize it or we might try to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's something you said there that is so powerful as well, is also accepting the fact there's going to be discomfort. Whatever you're saying, you're not saying, okay, it's going to be easy when you do practice it or when you put it into place.
No, no, not at all. And I've been practicing for years, and still sometimes that discomfort comes up, and you just acknowledge it. Wow, this feels really uncomfortable right now, and I know that this is what I have to do in order to make sure that I'm meeting my goals and making sure that I am able to make space for my wellness, to make sure that this is something that I truly want to do. Right. So again, it's always doing that self-assessment. And like like we were just speaking about, like having that discomfort, it's all about, like, when we're going through the healing journey, when we're going through our wellness journey, there's going to be discomfort. That's the one thing that's going to be guaranteed, because you are changing patterns, you're shifting mindsets, right? You're doing things differently that you've been doing for decades, right? It's going to happen. But what is incredibly important throughout the journey is to be able to understand that the whole goal is to increase your window of tolerance, right? It's not that I'm going to get uncomfortable. It's about me increasing my window of tolerance to sit with the discomfort a little bit longer, right? Sometimes I get uncomfortable, right? Not I, but sometimes people get uncomfortable and then they just run, right? Because again, that mind body is showing up like, hey, we don't do this. We don't do this. We have to remove ourselves when we go to that avoidance and abandonment, neglect, and all those other things that can come up. But it's so important to, I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to sit with this for a while. Why am I uncomfortable? And the more that I practice doing that, I'm actually increasing my window of tolerance that does allow for me to change to enhance my quality of life. Right? So it's all like a spiral effect. But there is going to be discomfort. And the whole idea is that you want to increase your window of tolerance to sit with that discomfort just a little bit longer than you did last week or that you did last month. Let me just increase it a little bit more today and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, because when we have those feelings, the first thing we want to do is we want to run away from it. It's almost like the right thing, or we may even numb it out. That's why we might shop, we might use recreational drugs, we might use social media, we might put other things in just to avoid or minimize that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it can go into like that fight or flight, right? So that sympathetic nervous system, like, that also increases that blood pressure and that heart rate, and you're just ready to go, which actually when we talk about that, that is when we have that increase of symptoms, right? And if I'm working to create an experience that allows me to have less symptoms or be able to effectively manage what comes up, then I'm going to have to start doing things that actually help me regulate, that actually help me enhance those feel good hormones, that actually help me to decrease that blood pressure, and so I can decrease my anxiety and stress, like really things that kind of trigger that parasympathetic nervous system. All looking for a calm, rest, and digest state is very, very important.
Definitely, because when you do feel at that heightened feeling or in that heightened state, you are more likely to be reactive, or you are more likely to act or behave in a way that may be in accordance of what you would normally want to be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's what the book is about, right? When we talk about intentionally, it's really taking inventory. Okay, what's coming up for me right now? What do I need? So that you can be more responsive and less reactive. And when I'm more responsive, then I'm and increases the probability that I'm able to link to things that make me feel good, things that help me remain calm or remain in control the best way that I can in those moments, because I'm being intentional. I'm showing up on purpose in ways that I can show myself some love and kindness, in ways that I can be able to be graceful with myself and show myself compassion by taking inventory. Okay, Samiyrah, what do you need right now? What's coming up for you? Okay, that feels whatever it may feel like. Okay, what do you need right now? And be able to meet that need.
And it is that kind of almost like a, I don't want to say a step process, but it is that, what am I feeling? What do I need? What's going on in this moment?
Hmm.
And it's almost like, also you said about gratitude and compassion. It also means slowing down your breath as well when you're doing these activities.
Oh, absolutely. 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 When you're saying like seems like a step-by-step process, it just reminded me because I was just speaking to a client and we are talking about, how far she's come because things have now become automatic. In the beginning, it does seem like a step-by-step process because you're practicing, right? And as I practice, I have to practice step by step. Like when you first learn to tie a shoe, you're doing bunny ear, wrap around, right? That step. But then all of a sudden, the more I do it, now I'm just tying my shoe. And now it just is automatic. And she was speaking of it very matter of fact. And I had to pause. I said, whoa, this is what the work looks like. This is like you're doing it. And, if me putting the mirror up allowed her to say, whoa, I am doing it without having to really think about the step by step by step. But it's because she was so intentional about doing the step by step by step and practicing that. Now it's developed new neural pathways that now it becomes automatic.
Yeah, it becomes your version of your new norm or your routine or your habits. Because
Yeah.
you said, okay, you can have toxic patterns, you can also replace them with more healthier ways of being.
Yeah, it's all about those healthy ways of coping and defining what that means for you. You mentioned something about deep breathing, and I think that that's so incredibly important. People don't realize like that's the one tool that we always have to really help us regulate and really help us find a center in the here and now. Really, sometimes I'll do that, just deep breathing and understanding. Okay, where am I feeling it in my body? Right, knowing that mind and body is definitely connected, but being intentional about holding space for them both. One of the exercises that I always teach my clients is the stop technique. The stop technique, it's a mindfulness practice where you're able to really focus on the breath and being able to be in the here and now. And it really helps you to respond in a more conscious way versus that subconscious reaction. So you notice that you're getting really frustrated or something is causing extreme anger for you. Stop is an acronym. So we first stop, and you can say stop. You can say your name, or sometimes you can pinch yourself right here. That's what I'll do. But you stop, then you take a breath, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And that allows you to come right back to this moment. And then you observe what's coming up for me. Ooh, I'm really frustrated right now. Versus being absorbed by that frustration, which sends you off to whatever chaos you're about to enter. But if I stop, take a breath, and then observe, I'm no longer allowing myself to get absorbed because I'm noticing it versus being directly engaged with it. And then P is proceed. Proceed is the next step that is going to best support yourself. So, what am I going to proceed with to create space for myself? What am I going to proceed with to make sure that my need is met in a healthy way versus engaging in this toxic pattern or this unhealthy way of coping that I've been so accustomed to? So, it really allows you to have that space to be intentional with how you're going to show up for yourself. You're stopping, you're taking the breath, you're observing, taking inventory of what's coming up for you. What do I need? And then P, you're proceeding with the next best step that's going to help meet that need in a healthy way versus the subconscious programming that leads you to chaos.
And that is an incredible thing to do as well. That can be really powerful and help people to just slow down, like you said, to connect to what is in the now. And then, okay, how am I going to proceed going forward? Exactly what you said. And in fact, one of the questions that came up was, what do you suggest if somebody's struggling to stay present? Of course, stop would help. Is there other things that you would recommend?
Yes, stop definitely helps with that to stay present. As well as I call them, the three C's, right? So usually if I'm not present, that means that I am so far in the past that I'm focusing on something that I can't change, or I'm so far in the future and questioning the uncertainty and trying to wonder how I'm going to manage something that has not happened, right? And so when I want to focus on the present, I understand that I realize, okay, I'm doing it again. I start with the C, that's catching it, right? Ugh, I wish I could just come back to this moment, right? So I'm catching it. Then I challenge it. So I challenge it by saying, okay, is this something that I have control over right now? The other C is change it. Well, what do I have control over? And being able to answer to that. What do I have control over? And that would be basically that alternative thought and being able to go with that. I always ask, what are the facts? What are the facts, right? Because if I'm not in the present moment, I'm usually focusing on something that may not be factual or something that's out of my control or definitely an uncertainty, right? And we call that rumination, right? I keep on thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. And that the more I spiral, the further it's getting me away from the present moment. So I want to catch it to bring myself back to the present moment. I want to challenge it. Is this something that I can change right now? Is this something, if the more I focus on it, is it actually changing? Right? Being honest with yourself. And then challenge it. What is something else that I can do in this moment or another thought that I can have right now that helps me bring myself back here? Right? I will not spend time thinking about this thing because right now I only have control over this, and then naming that thing and be doing more of the thing that you do have control over, because that's what it's all about, wanting to feel like you have control over something, right? Yeah. So the
Yeah.
top technique as well as the three C's definitely helpful in help bringing you back to this present moment.
And that does really help because we can do that. We can look at either worst case scenario. So, like you said, we can kind of go way into the future and try to predict something that we don't know actually is the reality. It may just be a version of storytelling, or we can get stuck in the past. And that's where I think even compassion can really come into it because we can hold against ourselves some of the so called mistakes we feel we've made. So that also robs us of being in the present.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Feeling like you made a mistake, right? And so a lot of people actually are observed doing that, right? And realizing, okay, what was happened, what are some ways that I can show up for myself, or what are some ways that I can pour into myself right now, right? Okay, if it was a mistake that happened, what are some ways that I can prepare, if that does happen again? What would that look like? Kind of like safeguarding your well-being, right? What would that look like? But being able to create a new narrative is really important. That's where those three C's, catch it, challenge it, change it. The change it is really developing that new narrative than what you've been telling yourself about the past mistakes or something that you wish you could have changed. Well, what's the new narrative that we can create? Right? I realize what has happened, and what is happening right now is that I'm deciding not to give that any more attention. Instead, I'm going to do this, right? Because we don't want to say I'm just deciding not to give it any more attention, because the more I tell my brain that, it actually wants to focus on what we don't want to give attention, right? So we can say that, and then we want to replace it. So instead, I'm going to do this, or next, I'm going to do this. Moving forward, I'm going to show up for myself in this way.
And that is key to do because we can then, like you said, we can spiral, we can ruminate, and that helps be really concise and draw yourself into, okay, this is what I can do for myself in the here and now. And it can also then shape how you show up, like you said, going forward in certain situations or even in certain relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. That's majority of what I work with my clients is about the here and now, really mindfulness and how you show up for yourself in the present moment. The more that we do that, that actually increases self-esteem, it boosts confidence. It also helps manage anxiety as well as increase mood, those that do show or display depressive symptoms.
Of course, and that does bring you back into your current feelings and what is actually happening around you, because anxiety can happen from feeling that things are out of control too. Of course, there's loads of other reasons for it, but a heightened feeling of that is, wow, this is happening to me. A, B, or C is happening to me, and it's out of my control.
Right, right. And so a lot of, what I'm just thinking here you speak is about life in general, right? Life in general is so filled with ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys, and coming to an acceptance of that as well, right? So many things that you can control. What we can't control is the ebbs and flows of life, right? And so, what would happen if instead of trying to control it and being so rigid in the moment, instead of doing that, what if we flowed with the ebbs and flows of life? What would that look like? What if we allowed the wave to come and then watched it go away, right? Instead of allowing the wave to come and feeling like you're drowning and being able to consume all of that water and kind of feeling like there's an undertaking. What would happen if we became an observer of what was coming up in our experience versus fully being absorbed by it and then becoming paralyzed? So a lot of the work that I do is really helping with that observation. What does that look like to observe your situation versus fully being consumed by it? Yeah.
What was coming to me is that expression of being an observer of your thoughts.
Hmm. Yeah, observe, watch them come, watch them go. And actually, one of the things that I do is, that urge surfing. That's what I call it, right? Urge surfing is also a mindfulness practice. And so, urge surfing is just like the wave that I explain, right? These thoughts and these feelings, usually, anxiety is definitely correlated with these thoughts that can be really, really overwhelming. And so, as these thoughts come one by one, understanding that you can look at them like a wave. They come up. What don't know about waves, that when waves come up, they also come down, right? There's also a low tide. So being able to look at that, okay, it's coming up. Where do I feel it in my body? What's coming up for me right now? And being able to watch it go as well is so incredibly important.
That can be so grounding as well. That's what was coming to me, the word.
Absolutely. And that's what mindfulness is all about. Mindfulness is definitely set in grounding and resourcing and being able to help regulate that mind and body connection. I love it.
Yeah, it's incredible work, obviously, that you do. And one thing, actually, to circle back to what you were saying about pouring into yourself and your well-being. Of course, yes, we're speaking about clients, but even as a practitioner, how do you do that for you, given the work you do, what you hear?
Yeah, I definitely have to be intentional about that. So everything that I just named to you in regards to those practices is not just something that I teach, it's something that I continuously practice. So the stop technique I'm doing, those 3 C's I'm doing. Sometimes when I'm feeling like things are becoming so incredibly overwhelming, I'm practicing urge surfing. In the mornings, I have a routine that helps me in regards to setting up for my day. I always say that you need to set yourself up for success, right? And so body scanning, which is like meditative practice, really from head to toe, just understanding what's coming up for me in my body is so incredibly important. I'm big on somatic learning and understanding like there is a mind and body connection, and how I feel in my body is going to definitely influence the thoughts that I have and the emotions that come up. So in the mornings, those body scannings, listening to gospel music, that definitely helps me. And music is definitely key to a lot of my clients as well. And then being able to write it out. I do a lot of brain dumping, a lot of journaling, that helps me to release. Sometimes when I don't Maybe I'm in between sessions of speaking to a therapist, or maybe I don't want to dump it on a friend. Being able to dump it into a journal and just get it out of my body and onto paper is definitely helpful as well. And I love the fact that you asked that question too, like not just what am I helping clients through, but as a practitioner, how am I doing it myself? Because I think it's so important for us to honor that we are humans, right? We are also living this human experience as we're helping other people navigate through their human experience. We definitely have to do things to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves well, right? How am I showing up for myself on purpose? Because, and I think those are some of the best practitioners, actually, the people that are intentional about how they show up for themselves. Because how can you teach someone else how to do it if you're not practicing it yourself? If how can you model that if you're not actually being a model, right? So I think that that's so important that you asked me that, and so I appreciate that.
Because I thought that's something that needs to be recognized as well. Because I think people can see being as psychotherapists, being in the helping profession, and it can be that false narrative of somehow we're exempt from these things, whereas, like you said, we have the same human experience
Mhm.
and also face certain challenges. So it's worth recognizing that okay, how does it look like in our daily lives too?
Right, right. And and it may not be showing up that it's affecting us so much is because we're practicing it. And that's why we encourage our clients to do the same thing. The more you show up for yourself, the more that you practice, it becomes automatic. And it's something that just allows you to safeguard your well-being and be intentional about doing that because you are doing it daily. You're pouring into your cup a little bit more every day and understanding that you get to define what that looks like for you.
I think that's so important to know as well. Of course, yes, we can share certain things, but it's almost like trial and error too.
Mhm.
And okay, I might resonate more with this. It's going back to that. I'm feeling this way today. I might need that meditation practice, or today I'm feeling this way, the journaling. Or you may be so overstimulated, you're not regulated at all, where you just need to go back to the stop method.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I always teach my clients that first, because that's always the foundation, right? Coming back to the here and now, stopping so that you can really take inventory. Okay, what do I need to do next? Because sometimes you can feel oversaturated when you're just trying to do all these other concepts. Let's just stop, right? Let's take a breath. Let's observe what is actually coming up. Where do I feel that in my body? All right. Now let's proceed. What's the next thing that I need to do in order to meet these needs? What's the next thing I need to do in order to support myself in the here and in the now?
That is so true. And in terms of actually what was coming to me when you were saying all of this, it's actually where do you feel it in your body?
Mm-hmm.
Some name an emotion or we'll label it, but we don't even stop. Like I have clients say to me, "Oh, I could feel it in my throat or my chest,"
Yeah.
when they're trying to share something difficult. How important is that to do as well, to recognize where it is?
Yeah, it's very important because you can actually give yourself something else that helps meet that body need that might actually enhance that emotional and mental need, right? So, if I have a headache that I may go for a walk. I may decide to rest for a minute, right? And once I decide to rest for a little bit, that might increase my energy, which actually made my headache go away, right? And so it gives you an opportunity to know exactly what is coming up for you and being able to kind of, I would say, like parent yourself, you know, understanding, oh, okay, I may need this. This may help me. This may help me with, my headache or my stomach ache. There's also, what I teach my clients too is that there's a nerve, right, that connects our cranium, our brains to our gut, right? That vagus nerve, right? And so whatever when we talk about like those are 9 dimensions of wellness, when something's happening and mentally, emotionally, that may couple over into my physical wellness. Well, that's because there's signals being ran up and down, right? Your body that's all connected. So it may show up and manifest physically because I don't feel a certain way mentally or emotionally. And so understanding that, one, that there is a connection, right? Once you're aware that there is a connection, understanding that they go hand in hand. I think it's going to be important too to help you kind of one, honor your feelings, and then meet that need of where am I feeling it in my body, and being able to understand, okay, um, my stomach is hurting me. Am I having a nutritious habit of eating? Am I making sure that I'm doing what I need to do to eat well and making sure that I have good nourishment? That's important too, which ultimately is directly correlated to your mood as well, right? Am I hydrated? Right? Understanding and asking yourself those questions. So taking inventory of what you need physically, emotionally, and mentally all work together. Like I always teach about mind, body, soul connection, right? If one is depleted, it's definitely going to affect the other area. So being able to notice those correlations are so important in treating yourself well and taking good care of yourself.
Thank you. And yes, the synergy is so important as well. We can't separate ourselves always into compartments. I agree with you there in that thinking. Is actually doing that, like you said, the body scan, taking inventory as a whole as well can really help define what you need in that moment.
Right, exactly, right? Maybe I'm noticing my back is a little tense, so I'm going to involve myself in some stretching today, right? And when I move my body, what is that doing? That actually is increasing my mood. That's helping me increase my serotonin, right? And really helping me feel a little bit better or create some ways that I can be good to myself. And so just always taking inventory of that is incredibly important.
Thank you so much for sharing everything. And before obviously we wrap up this discussion today, how can people reach out to you?
So definitely you can follow me here on Instagram, Samiyrah Bennett LCSW. You can go to my website, SamiyrahBennettLCSW.org, where I have resources. Like if you're looking for a therapist, I have a free ebook that provides 15 questions to help you be prepared for the consultation phone call. That is also where my book is available. My published book, Intentionally Minding the Business of Me, which is discussing 10 strategies to help you build a mindset that leads to your most favorite version of self. And that's where you can find me.
Grateful for everything you're doing. And yes, to echo that, because your work is extensive. You offer CBT, EMDR, and you work with quite a few modalities that can really help an individual really check in with themselves and what they're feeling, their emotions, as well as their body sensations.
Yes, absolutely. So if there's one thing that I would leave is to make sure that you are treating yourself good by taking inventory of what you need, what's showing up in your experience, mind, body, and soul, and honoring your needs and knowing that you get to do that in a very intentional way to make sure that you are living the best quality life that you can and that you deserve.
Thank you. Thank you. So grateful for you joining us and giving our time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amrit. I appreciate sharing space with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and catch up with you all soon.
Take care.
Bye bye.